I wanted to make a couple notes here. I'll go over it more and make another video, I suppose. Um, yeah, I was talking about communities with a friend of mine. How that is related to pretty much everything else that humans care about. Um, what we call spirituality is engagement with community, whatever that means. It could be family, it could be one person, but it's another person. It's something to share. And that fuels all good things in life because we're social creatures. Even those who aren't particularly social, we're still social. We need a little bit of human interaction. There's a tiny handful of outliers that doesn't apply to, but they're statistical aberration. A lot of people who think they're antisocial are bitter, and maybe there's good reason for that, but the bitterness is fueled by experiences, not by an objective view. If they actually look, how probable is it? Well, there's two aspects to this. One, how probable is it that the average person is going to disappoint them, hurt them, whatever? And two, what is their selection criteria for the people they allow into their circles? Because in life, the goal is to become self-possessed. That's one of the greatest secrets there is in this universe. A lot of people don't realize that when they're young, or at any stage, perhaps. But that is the goal of life. For most people, one way or the other. And that's the seat of power. Power is degrees of control, degrees of influence, really. Many people try, and that's the thing. A lot of people try for control. They try to rigidly control something in the immediacy of emotion. Let's say that's not a good approach. A rigid control. It's crude. It lacks all finesse. And the more one person controls another, the less individuality that person expresses when this control is present. It can be useful in some narrow applications, but for the most part, it stifles the human spirit. And that is why cloistered communities tend to be very insular and very non-spiritual, let's say, because the community tends to be more focused on controlling others than in growing others, or they lessen individuality and strengthen community. They strengthen community by building walls. That's why they're a cloistered community. I mean that literally sometimes and figuratively. Because their practices are often at odds with the wider society, so they have to be secretive. So they learn to be secretive. And the children grow up to bear the fruit of those practices. And that's not always a good thing. That's just an example. I'm not picking on the closest communities in particular. However, the greater deviation from the norm in society, the more hidden one must be, or it has to be an accepted eccentricity. or something that's a positive. Otherwise, the community will drive the member out. That is where social exclusion happens. One way or another, they'll be driven out. They might be observed, and then they break a law or do something, and then they get put away for a little while, and this happens repeatedly, or they simply, no one likes them, and so they eventually get the clue and leave, or they can't get a job, or they get fired from their job due to these social activities, and so they have to get a job elsewhere, and they end up moving because nobody likes them. That sort of thing. It can be good. There are antisocial people. I mean, in the clinical sense, antisocial in the clinical sense, that really don't fit into society. They're parasitic and predatory. But for the most part, it's a very destructive practice to socially exclude people for nonconformity. So, the more someone is an individual, the more spiritual they can be. The less individual, the less spiritual they will be, because they may have practices, community practices, but they don't tailor themselves to the individual. The individual tends to tailor themselves to the practices, the shared practices, so they become less distinguishable. That's something that has been noted throughout time, and it's tragic. So in the internet age, it's best to avail oneself of the resources of the whole world. Now, there is a lot of information that is not accessible to everyone. People build walls for various reasons. However, there is a great deal of valuable information that is free, perhaps somewhat difficult to find, but if one looks, they can find it. YouTube is a good example. Takes a bit of work, but you can find how-to videos about almost anything. How good they are? Well, ask around, not about the videos, but about how you understand the practice should be done. And then you should be pointed in the right direction. Always make sure that there's a real world test, and not necessarily a small sampling. If it's something important, don't just trust a YouTube video. Don't trust my YouTube videos just because you trust me. I could be wrong. I could be mistaken in some facet. There might be better videos out there on the subject. So I think it's important to practice individuality and community, and that does mean that some of the more radical ideas or some of the more divergent behaviors shouldn't be practiced with all groups. That being said, the more individualistic a person is, the more selective they must be in those they engage with. That it's not anyone's fault, really. It's just the way it ends up being. It's like with politics. There's various figures on different sides of the aisle, shall we say, that have that have been criticized by various people. But I find it's not about them. It's almost never about them. It's about them, what they represent. They are the equivalent of religious figures. So in certain cases, there's been deplorable people, and there's nothing. Their followers, when one listens to them, and I have listened to them very carefully, their followers are not talking about so much them as a person. They're talking about they're effective, or they're carrying forward a banner essentially that they agree with. They're making their grievances manifest. They're hurting the right people. They're helping the right people. That sort of thing. And you can label it however you want to, but there is not really a difference between politics and religion in any practical sense. So I wouldn't make too strong a distinction about it, because it's not meaningful, really. So that's my take on society's core drivers, if you will. And one has to weave all of this together into a cohesive life. Usually, there's usually people that we engage with that we don't want to engage with. Perhaps at work, perhaps in family, perhaps some of our periphery friend circles. But we have to, because the trade-off is very substantial. So, I suggest not spending a lot of time debating people on the internet, certainly, maybe not even in person, because you're not debating about right and wrong. It's certainly not about logic. It's about belief systems, often divergent, clashing belief systems. And you cannot dissuade someone using reason when they did not arrive at it using reason. That's not quite it. I often ask in such situations, whose reason? Someone says they're being this or that is reasonable. I said, whose reason? Who determines that? And then that can get into an interesting debate about the logic frameworks that people are using. Yes, people use a certain amount of logic, but it only goes so far as this works, or this is something I believe because other people believe it, and they believe it because ultimately it works for them. So it's a practical thing. You can't assault someone's core beliefs and not expect resistance. So the thing is, what we have to do if we want to reach people, we have to, and it doesn't matter what your beliefs are in particular, we have to befriend people, and we have to widen perspectives, including our own perspective. And then there's a mutual change that happens. We're not evangelists per se, but we are teachers and we are students, and these two are equally important. So, and that's really important because usually people pick one or the other, but we are both in our life. So, yeah.